Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the What If South is Up podcast. In place of our normal episode this week, I am going to read an excerpt from my upcoming release, The Heart of Death. This is out of my wheelhouse, a little bit different, and I hope you guys enjoy it. The woman silently sitting across from me was smartly dressed in a blue business suit. Her hair hung perfectly about her shoulders as though purposely arranged for a portrait. Her pen, scratched across the notepad, balanced atop her knees for a moment and stopped. I couldn't help but wonder what she was writing down, not that it mattered. I had told this story before, and no one ever believed it. A fascinating fiction, but I want to get to know the real you. She rested the pen across the back of her fingers and looked up. Her perfectly made-up face was an empty mask, as though I hadn't just claimed to be responsible for every death in the last 3 millennia. I want to hear about your past. How did Aeron Mast become a household name? I took a long drag on my cigar and leaned back in the leather lounge chair. May I ask a question of you? She nodded. When I look at you, I see a moderately young, driven woman who takes her work seriously. Would you say that is correct? Sure. How much of the person you present to the world is real? Is this the real you, or deep down are you a scared little girl with braces and a Hannah Montana backpack that is afraid of what everyone thinks of you? I don't see what you're getting at, but you do. I can see it on your face. You think you're a fraud, barely scraping by on a good GPA and some decent family connections. How long did it take to put that makeup on, to do your hair this morning? You just hide your fears behind a tailored suit, perfect hair, layers of makeup, and $1,700 Prada heels. She tried to interject, but I held up a finger. I'm not done. There is nothing wrong with being afraid. A little fear is healthy. It's what keeps us from blindly walking off a cliff or using a hot stove as a pillow. No, I applaud you for masking it as well as you do, but my point remains. No one is who they appear to be. Most times, the truth is mundane. Sometimes it's dark, often sad, but always different than what we allow people to see. There is one exception. Me. I took another pull from my cigar and set it in a crystal ashtray next to my seat. I am an open book. It may sound ludicrous to hear me tell it, but I promise you that story is 100% true. The reporter, whose name I had already forgotten, gathered her things as she stood. Okay, Mr. Mast, I appreciate your time, but I do not appreciate mine being wasted. I think we're done here. So be it. I shrugged and returned to my cigar as she shouldered her bag and clicked away. I mentally kicked myself. Somehow, I had caught the heels and missed the $3,800 bag. I was getting sloppy in my old age. Oh well, better luck next time. A soft chime from the grandfather clock in the corner signaled the hour. Another one down, but how many more to go? This dance had become tiresome. Century after century I walked amongst them, a wolf in sheep's clothing, or perhaps a god in a well-tailored suit. My desire for a chronicler wasn't born of vanity, but a profound need for someone to understand, to truly grasp the weight of what I was. Most saw a facade and refused to see anything more. This one, with her carefully constructed armor of professionalism, was no different. Most of them were just as shallow, false, and boring as she had been. The next appointment, according to my assistant's meticulously organized schedule, was an hour away. A young man from a fledgling online journal, undoubtedly hungry for a scoop, whatever it might be. He'd probably ask about my investment portfolio or my charitable donations, oblivious to the true story within reach. They always were. The chime faded, leaving behind the rich scent of leather, old books, and my dwindling cigar smoke. I swirled the amber liquid in my crystal tumbler, watching the last ice cube melt into oblivion. Time, for them, was a finite commodity measured in moments and deadlines. For me, it was an ocean, vast and terrifyingly endless. The irony was not lost on me, the god of death seeking to be immortalized in print. The young man arrived punctually, a nervous energy radiating from him like heat from a lamp. He was all wide eyes and tentative questions, meticulously prepared notes spilling from a cheap folder. I put him through a similar, if slightly less aggressive, routine. He faltered faster than the last, his composure crumbling under the weight of my direct gaze. He, too, left, muttering apologies about misunderstanding the nature of the interview. Honestly, it was a miracle I hadn't been blacklisted by the entire journalism world by now. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. The parade of hopeful, ambitious, and ultimately blind reporters continued. Some were seasoned veterans, cynical and jaded, others fresh-faced graduates brimming with naive idealism. None of them saw past the surface I presented. None of them heard the echo of forgotten languages in my voice or the millennia of regret etched into the corners of my eyes. They saw a billionaire, a titan of industry, a target for a juicy profile. They saw everything but the ancient, banished entity beneath. The sheer, repetitive banality of it could crack stone. I had cultivated this image, the forward-thinking, occasionally ruthless, yet ultimately philanthropic patriarch of industry. For centuries, I had adapted the mask as required by the prevailing zeitgeist. In this era, the mask was one of technological genius and transparent power. It was exhausting. That morning, after dismissing the last of the journalists who had come to profile my latest foundational grant, I felt the centuries pressing down upon me like physical weights. The air in my penthouse office, curated and climate-controlled, suddenly felt thin, lacking the raw, organic tang of true mortality. I pressed the intercom button. "Eleanor, cancel the rest of the afternoon, clear the ledger, tell them I'll be unreachable indefinitely." Eleanor, a middle-aged woman whose genetic code seemed to have been replaced entirely by algorithms, responded instantly. "Understood, Mr. Mast. All counts will be rerouted. Do you require your driver and security detail?" "No," I replied, moving toward the private elevator. "I require anonymity, Eleanor, a brief walk to clear my head. You may leave when you're done here. I won't be returning." "Yes, sir." I descended 33 floors and stepped out into the controlled chaos of the city. The noise hit me first, a screeching symphony of engines and chatter. I adjusted the lapels of my overcoat and pulled an English-style flat cap over my head. I wore the uniform of the successful predator, dark wool, precise cut, and an air of untouchable expense. In this case, a clean, three-piece suit and woolen overcoat. It was ancient by the standards of clothing, made for and purchased by me in England in the 20s. It was stubbornness on my part to keep wearing it, but the media called it fashion, a callback to a Netflix show about some gangsters that I'd never bothered to watch. I walked without a destination, threading my way through the hurried crowds. They moved so quickly, these ants, rushing toward ephemeral goals, a meeting, a flight, a deadline, a date. I watched the frantic energy in their faces, the stress lines forming around their young eyes. I remembered when these streets were mud tracks, when the great towers soaring above me were merely grand dreams constructed of chalk and hope. I had seen the original scaffolding. I had known the architects. This city, like all cities, was a living organism built on layers of forgotten grief and ambition. They never change, do they? The names shift. Babylon, Jerusalem, Rome, Paris, London, Prague, Tokyo, Seoul, New York. But the underlying human impulse remains constant. Hunger, fear, and the desperate scramble for dominance over others. I felt a profound, aching disassociation. I was moving through a museum of my own curated memories, yet unable to touch the exhibits. I craved something real, something unvarnished by the pixelated gloss of the 21st century. I turned sharply off the polished main avenue, diving into the labyrinthine alleys of the older commercial district. Here, the noise was different, dampened, overlaid with the deep hum of ventilation systems and the distant rhythmic clang of something industrial. The buildings were shorter, the facades cracked, showing the original brick beneath the veneers of modernity. After 3 blocks, I stopped before an awning that bore the faded, almost ineligible name, the Harbor Rat. It was exactly what I was looking for. A dive bar, smelling faintly of cigarettes, stale beer, disinfectant, and the lingering residue of poor decisions. I pushed through the heavy wooden door, which had likely survived the repeal of Prohibition, and stepped into the gloom. The interior was magnificent in its ugliness. The air was thick and golden, cut by the dust motes dancing in the meager shafts of afternoon light slicing through the high, barred windows. The jukebox was playing something aggressively loud and structurally unsound. The bartender, a man whose face suggested a deep and abiding distrust of all customers, looked up with dull suspicion. I walked to the bar and took a stool near the far end, away from the two men arguing over a game of 8-ball. The leather on the stool was cracked, the cigarette-scarred mahogany bar surface sticky beneath my hand. It was perfect. Aeron Mast, slumming it, I muttered to myself, settling my coat. I addressed the suspicious man, McAllen 30, neat, double. He raised one eyebrow, my expensive taste clashing jarringly with the environment, but poured the drink without comment. I paid him with a crisp $100 bill, which he examined like a foreign artifact before slamming a handful of change onto the counter. I ignored the change. I lifted the glass, inhaling the peaty smoke of the scotch. It was a flavor familiar across lifetimes, a necessary anchor. I took a slow sip, letting the heat bloom in my chest. For the first time all day, the armor felt slightly less tight. I sat in comfortable silence for perhaps 10 minutes, watching the slow, grinding mechanics of the bar. It was a pure distillation of human smallness, and it was therapeutic. Then the door opened, and another mortal entered. He was young, perhaps 35, dressed in clothes that suggested he had recently attempted and failed to appear professional before giving up entirely. His jacket was rumpled, his hair unkempt, and his face was a portrait of acute, devastating failure. He radiated despair, not the philosophical, existential despair I carried, but the immediate, personal, crippling kind. He stumbled slightly as he took the stool next to mine. He didn't look at me, focusing instead on the collection of cheap liquor bottles behind the bar. "Beer," he mumbled, his voice hoarse. "Whatever's cheapest, please." The bartender poured him a piss-pale beer, which he pushed toward the young man. He barely registered the glass, just lifted it and took a long, desperate gulp. I observed him subtly. He was entirely consumed by whatever sorrow had brought him here. He wasn't trying to look tough or cool, he was simply broken. But I could also feel something else, something larger radiating from the man. After he set the glass down, he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, pulled out a sheaf of papers. A manuscript, neatly bound but now crinkled from handling. Tucked into the front page was a smaller piece of white paper, a rejection slip. He stared at the words, his jaw clenching. He didn't need to read it. I could see the shape of the disappointment, the final, dismissive word after months, perhaps years of dedication. The editor's note was likely boilerplate, yet to him it was a death sentence. I felt a flicker of something close to pity, or perhaps recognition. Failure, true failure, is a universal currency. I decided to intervene, not out of kindness. True kindness is a luxury I cannot afford, but out of sudden, burning curiosity. I needed a distraction, and this young man felt dangerously close to the edge of clarity. I leaned slightly toward him, my voice pitched just above the clamor of the jukebox. "That's a hard look, son," I said. He flinched, startled as if he hadn't realized anyone else existed. He turned his head slowly, and his eyes, a striking shade of green, currently bleary with fatigue and defeat, focused on my face. He saw the expensive coat, the quiet gold watch, the glass of amber perfection. He saw the Titan. "Excuse me?" he replied stiffly, clutching the manuscript tighter. "The rejection," I clarified, gesturing subtly toward the papers. "It stings worse than anything, doesn't it? When they tell you your effort and your soul poured onto the page is merely unsuitable." "May I?" I gestured to the crumpled papers held together with binder clips. He hesitated, then let out a sharp, humorless laugh as he pushed the papers over. "Unsuitable. That's a polite word for abysmal, I think. Fifth time. The fifth rejection for this one." He sighed, the sound heavy and profound. "I'm Lucas Thorne." I offered a small, measured smile as I skimmed the manuscript. It was well written, concise, but also dizzying in its depth. Aeron Mast. His eyes widened, finally registering the name, a fleeting look of awe mixed quickly with suspicion. "The Aeron Mast?" "One and the same." And you are a writer, Lucas Thorne, one who is currently being told his perspective isn't marketable. Lucas nodded miserably. It's historical fiction, very niche. I spent 3 years on it. I researched the hell out of the medieval trade routes through the Levant. It's authentic, too authentic apparently. They want vampires or a sequel to something terrible to begin with. This is good. Great, even. But authenticity, I mused, taking another sip of the scotch and sliding the papers back to him, is a rare and dangerous quality these days. It certainly won't get you published. He looked up, suddenly meeting my gaze with a spark of desperate challenge. Then what will? I set my glass down, the sound echoing lightly in the silence I had manufactured between us. I looked at Lucas Thorne, truly looked at him, and saw the raw, unschooled hunger for recognition that fuels all great self-destructive endeavors. He was sharp, clearly intelligent, and beaten down just enough to be malleable. Crucially, he was the antithesis of the polished, pre-approved reporters who usually followed me. He saw the truth in the world's structure, but was too poor and too honest to profit from it. He needed a story. I needed a scribe, a witness, a confessor. I leaned in, resting my elbows on the sticky bar. The jukebox shifted tracks, favoring a gloomy ballad. Lucas, I said softly, letting the full weight of my ancient authority drop into the syllable. What if I told you I could give you a story so authentic, so utterly unprecedented that no publisher would ever dare reject it? He scoffed, but the misery in his eyes was replaced by a flicker of hope. A dangerous little candle in the drafty room. Aeron Mast wants to give me his biography. The corporate empire story? I shook my head slowly. No, that story is already written, and it is a tiresome lie. I'm speaking of a different story, the one that stretches back before the names on the maps, before the records in your archives, the one built on dust and blood, on promises broken to entities older than the concept of time. I paused, allowing the weight of the statement to settle. I introduced no names, no titles. I merely offered the mystery of the abyss. I have lived for an immeasurably long time, Lucas. I have seen things that would break the minds of your historians. I have been known by names whispered in forgotten temples. And I am tired of carrying the weight of the truth alone. And you, Lucas Thorne, you are desperate enough, and perhaps skilled enough, to serve as the vessel. The young man was breathing shallowly, gripping the edge of the bar. His beer sat forgotten. He was looking at me, not Aeron Mast the billionaire, but something else entirely, finally peeling back the layers of the mask I had presented to the world. Sensing the chill of what lay beneath, his eyes were wide now, reflecting the golden gloom of the bar, filled with terror, fascination, and the writer's irresistible urge toward the unspeakable narrative. I want you to write my story, Lucas, I confirmed, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Just as I tell it.